Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call to order our first hearing of the evening. This is the application of Sherry M. Tomasetti. The application is dated August 23rd, 2016. Okay, I guess it is. Is it 17? Must be August 2017. You haven't been waiting a year for a hearing. That would be extraordinary, even for the Board of Appeals.
No, not that long.
Okay. And Ms. Tomasetti owns a piece of property at 75 St. Agatha Road, Milton, and she's proposing to build a roofed porch on the front of her residence and a 240 square foot L-shaped mudroom addition, which is going to connect the existing garage to the main home at 75 St. Agatha Road. The bylaw says that the new portions of buildings have to be set back 20 feet from the front property line, and here Ms. Tomasetti is requesting a variance so as to be 12 feet from the front property line. And the bylaw also requires a minimum of 10 feet from side property lines, and here the applicant is proposing 6.9 feet from the right side property line. The property is located in the Residence C zoning district. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening to my immediate right is attorney Kathleen O'Donnell, and to my immediate left is board member Nicholas Gray, also an attorney. The rules of the board are such that we'll hear from the applicant, then we'll hear from people who wish to speak in support of the application or have questions of the applicant. Then we'll hear from any person present who wishes to, if any, who wishes to speak in opposition to this application. The proceedings are being televised tonight, but the official record is not the television. It's our tape recording here, so that would ask that anyone who wants to speak come up to one of the microphones, because the tape cannot pick up people at the back of the room, and tell us your name and address and smile pretty so you look nice on TV. In terms of the hearing, the first hearing at least, we have the application. It's dated 8/14/2017. We have a plot plan of land by Michael Paul Antonino. The plot plan is dated April 20, 2016. Maybe that's the reason that the ad was talking about 2016. And we have a series of plans in 2 sheets from, it looks like, GEV Design of Canton, Massachusetts, showing the various elevations from the street in the rear, and showing the interior build-out of the proposed second floor plan. So we'll have all of those documents. We should have a denial letter from Mr. Prondak. Hold on one second here. We do. We have Mr. Prondak's denial letter of August 9, 2017, so we'll have all of those documents as evidence in the hearing. Ms. Tomasetti, is it Ms. Tomasetti?
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs.
Welcome to the Board of Appeals. You're going to make the presentation on your own behalf?
Sure.
Okay, great. We're happy to hear from you. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us about your application, and why you suggest the board should grant the variances that you are seeking.
Okay, I'm Sherry Tomasetti, and this is my husband, John Delaney. We are proposing to build a breezeway to attach an existing garage to our house to just make it easier in the winter for us to take off coats, obviously, for our little kids. And then the garage is already existing there, so it wouldn't change the property line as it exists, but according to the Board of Appeals, if you are adding and structure and attaching the garage to the house, it does change a little bit, because the way it was grandfathered in, it's not up to code or up to the bylaws.
And that's what Mr. Prondak, the building inspector, told you?
Correct. Okay. And then the other part that we are proposing to add is the front porch. It's a porch that will go from across the full length of the house, and it is about 6 feet wide, and that is the only thing that makes it a little bit less than 20 feet to the front of our property. So I think that was the only reason that was said that he said that we couldn't do it because it would be 12 feet to the property line instead of 20 feet to the property line.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like
No.
to add in support of your application? Okay, let me ask you some basic questions. How long have you lived in the dwelling?
6 years.
Okay, great. And what kind of residence is it?
A single family.
Okay, and what color is it?
It's tan.
And do you intend to construct the roofed porch in a manner that's consistent with the rest of your dwelling?
Yes.
Okay. And are these plans that you've submitted to us, are they substantially correct in terms of showing the additions to the property you intend to build?
Yes.
And you don't intend to change these plans, do you?
No, we're currently doing a couple other things which are on those plans. We don't intend to change those.
Okay, great. Let me ask you, did you have an opportunity to speak to your neighbors about this proposed?
Yes, we have spoken to probably 20 neighbors.
Oh, great. I won't ask you to name the 20 people, but did they sign a petition in support of your application for a variance?
They didn't because I thought it was an option, and I asked them all if they would, and they said, "Oh yeah, no problem. Do you need us to show up and fight for you?" And I was like, "No, it's okay."
You don't have to fight.
So, or to like say it's
To
okay.
support your application.
Oh, they were all very supportive.
Okay.
I didn't hear one person. We've been at multiple barbecues with 20 plus that have been all in support of our application.
Okay,
and
so
our-
nobody had any objections to these
Not to our face.
applications for variances? Okay, and did you show them the plans as well
Yes,
as?
actually, we have shown quite a few of them, the plans, and talked about it since last year. So
Okay.
when Antonino did the land survey, we did talk to a lot of our neighbors asking for help and why can't we build this mudroom, what are the bylaws? And so a lot of them knew. So there's Tom Caldwell, I think, sits on one of the boards. He was helpful. But he was
Okay.
in agreement that it was fine for him. He had no objections.
All righty, and without going through the addresses of all of these 20 people, is it fair to say that all of the neighbors who surround your property were members of that 20-person group who support your application for variance,
Yes,
including the people who may be most affected by the variance application?
yes.
Okay. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Gray?
No.
Ms. O'Donnell?
So you're not doing the addition thing on the second floor?
We are. That did not require a variance.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. And I do note that the garage, as you said, is existing. It's probably been there for some considerable period of time. 6.9 feet from the sideline. Okay.
I think that garage was built in 1997.
If you're lucky enough to get your application allowed, when do you intend to do this project? Do you intend to try to squeeze it in this season, or are you going to do it in the spring?
Yes, we intend to start as soon as possible. We have a contractor working on the addition, so I would like him to also do the mudroom and the front porch. If he can't do the front porch right now, that would be something that would be done next season.
Okay. Great. So if nobody has any questions, let me see if there's anybody in the audience who has any questions of Ms. Tomasetti and Mr. Delaney, her husband. Any questions regarding this application? Does anyone want to speak in support of this application for variance? So I guess you were right. None of the 20 people showed up.
I actually said if you're for it, you don't need a show.
No, okay, that's fine. Let me ask I guess the more important question, is there anyone present this evening who has objections to this particular application for variance? And there's no such person present. So do you have anything else you'd like to add in support of your application?
No.
Okay, most people would tell you to quit while you're ahead. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to end the evidence portion of this hearing, and we'll consider this application in open session and actually vote on it this evening.
Okay.
So, Mr. Gray, please, what do you have to say?
I like this. I think it's a good good addition to the house. It makes sense. It doesn't look like it's really, so I suppose this is my question now. The garage is the 6.9, because I printed the plot plan, but I left it in my bag at home.
I have a copy.
Would you like to
I'm looking
look
at it right there. The 6.9 feet is where the garage is, right? It's between the garage and the right, okay. So the garage is already there. It's just connecting it that's causing the problem. It doesn't seem to be increasing the nonconformity at all. And yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I would tend to support it.
Okay.
Keep it short.
I agree.
Mr. Ruddle?
I think, as you said, the garage has already been there. It makes a lot of sense. I can imagine the need for a mud, connection to the garage to the house. And I generally don't think that it makes any. I drove by the site to take a look. Seems consistent with what's in the neighborhood.
Okay. My view is, I think this application was very well presented, so congratulations on your presentation. The plans show a wonderful addition to your house. The porch is going to be terrific, and connecting to the garage will be even better. I think that you have unanimous neighborhood support, which is very, very important to us, because these variances are not insignificant variances. But in my view, they not only improve your home, they improve the neighborhood. I'm familiar with the neighborhood as well, and I think it'll be a great addition to your home, and a great investment for you and for your neighbors. So all those in favor of granting the two variance applications proposed by Ms. Tomasetti, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Congratulations, you've got
you.
your variances. Now,
Great, thank you.
what we have to do is we have to prepare a written decision,
Okay.
and that usually takes 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the timing of people's schedules, okay? That then has to be filed with the town clerk, and there's a 20-day appeal period from the date of that filing before your variances become final, okay? So Mr. Prondak or Ms. Fitzgerald will help you with getting a certified copy of the grant of the variance, and you have to be sure to record that in the registry of deeds, so the title to your house will be maintained, and people won't be wondering how you put this addition onto your house. Okay? That's very important. If your builder needs to do some preliminary work before the end of the 20-day period, you can't build out the improvement, but sometimes Mr. Prondak will let him do some demo work or some incidental work. You deal exclusively with Mr. Prondak on that issue.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
No?
Okay, keep in touch with Mrs. Fitzgerald, and she'll let you know when the variance has been signed up and filed.
Great, thank you.
Congratulations, and thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got about 3 minutes, folks, before we can start our second hearing. So at 7:45, we'll move along.
I've got some.
Did Mr. Wolf get a copy of this? Alrighty, folks, we're going to start our second hearing of the evening, and this is the application of David Arrowsmith, and we have Mr. Wolf.
Yes.
Mr. Wolf, I'm going to go through a lot of the preliminaries here, but we did have some objections that came into us later
Okay.
this afternoon, which I want you to be aware of. So let me continue with the preliminaries, and you'll be able to take a look at that while I'm going through this. So this is the application of David Arrowsmith, the owner of 410 Granite Avenue in Milton, which is in the business district. And the applicant is seeking a variance, really a use variance, and a special permit from the Milton zoning bylaw. The applicant is proposing to demolish the two existing residential buildings on the site and to build a four-story mixed-use building approximately 40 feet by 60 feet containing 5 two-bedroom dwelling units, one one-bedroom unit, and one 872 square foot of commercial space with 6 parking spaces to the rear of the to-be-constructed building, proposed building, I guess is the better way to put it, at 410 Granite Avenue in Milton. The business district uses under Section 3C of the bylaw do not allow multifamily residential mixed uses in this neighborhood. And the applicant is also seeking a special permit to construct this building up to a height of 45 feet and 5 stories, which needs a special permit. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me this evening to my immediate right is Kathleen O'Donnell, and to my immediate left is board member Nick Gray. The rules of the board are going to be the same as the first hearing. We'll hear from the applicant and the applicant's counsel. We'll hear from any person who wants to speak in support of the application or ask questions of the applicant. We'll hear from people who wish to speak, if any, objecting to this particular application for a use variance and a special permit. The proceedings are being tape recorded this evening, so that would ask that anyone who speaks come up to one of the microphones. The microphones do not project, they just record. So tell us your name and address, and speak up nice and loud and clear so that everyone in the hearing room can hear what's being said. We have a lot of hearings surrounding us tonight, so there may be a little bit of chaos, so speak up nice and clear and loud. The rules of the board are just going to be as the first hearing, and we have the application here, which is dated August 4th, 2017, filed by Attorney Scott Wolf on behalf of Mr. Arrowsmith. We have a 7/13/2017 denial letter by Joseph Prondak, our building commissioner. We have a series of preliminary plans. They're dated February 1st, 2017. They're by AGA Designs of Georgetown, Massachusetts. They're in multiple pages. General notes and conditions, proposed floor plans in multiple sheets. The proposed Granite Street elevation, proposed rear elevation, proposed side elevation, another side elevation plan. And we have a plot plan of the existing conditions by Gateway Survey Associates. The plot plan is dated March 8th, 2017. So we thank the applicant for submitting all of these materials. And Mr. Wolf, welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
I think this is the first time we've had you here.
It is the first time I've been here.
So good.
Glad to be here.
Welcome to the board. It's
Thank you.
great to have you, and we're delighted to hear your presentation.
Thank you. My name is Scott Wolf. I'm an attorney with Schlossberg LLC, 35 Braintree Office Park, Suite 401 in Braintree, Massachusetts. I'm joined tonight by the project manager for David Arrowsmith, Mr. Jude Waters, to my left.
Did you
and
say Drew?
Jude, J-U-D-E.
Thank you.
Waters with 2 T's.
Yeah.
As well as the project architect, Adam Gibbons. As you read in the application, Mr. Arrowsmith is seeking to redevelop a piece of property at 410 Granite Avenue in Milton. Currently, there are 2 residential structures on the property. One is a 2-family unit in the front and a single-family residence in the back, which currently has 9 total bedrooms. We're looking to demolish the 2 structures and build a new 4-story structure that's 43 feet high, which would require a special permit from this board, not because of the height, which appears to be by right, but because it would add a 4th story. The applicant also needs a variance because while the residential use is grandfathered, adding the by right commercial use creates a mixed use, which would require a variance from this board, which is explicitly allowed in Section 9D of the bylaw. The new construction would contain 6 residential units containing a total of 11 bedrooms plus 1 commercial unit on the first floor. While we can't promise any particular tenants, we are reaching out to professional offices and possibly retail. We don't think that the location of the building is such that 4 stories would be out of character. Mr. Gibbons will explain a bit later some of the surrounding buildings, as well as the location of the building, which everyone, I'm sure, is reasonably familiar with, who's from Milton. And we think that removing 9 units that are in very poor condition, that have revolving tenants, and replacing them with condominium units, not rental apartments, but condominium units that will sell for market rate, would ultimately benefit the square by having some increased pedestrian traffic, as well as some better quality retail, which that stretch does, it may have quality tenants, but we think the structures are not in great shape, and this will add one better structure to the neighborhood. I'm going to turn it over to, and by the way, I don't think that any of what we're trying to build doesn't derogate from the intent of the bylaw. Mixed use is expressly allowed by special permit, and we don't think that this substantially derogates from the intent of the bylaw. And while I'm sure there's opposition to this, we don't think the neighborhood is substantially impacted, would be substantially impacted by this development.
Disagree? Do you disagree with the building inspector that you can't have residential uses in this zone with your present application, with the development that you're proposing?
No, I do think I can have residential, by right, but I would have to conform with the bylaw regarding pre-existing non-conforming uses.
And you're not conforming with that?
Correct. No, we're going to be way outside of the
Sure.
existing footprint. So we would need a special permit for the mixed, a variance rather, for the mixed-use element.
Thank you. You said special permit, and I was confused.
Right, special permit for the height,
Yep.
variance for the
Variance for
mixed
the-
use.
Okay, thank
And one last note, which we'll show you on the plans, is that right now on-site, there are 2 parking spaces. The current plan proposes 6 parking spaces. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Gibbons for, he can show us the plans and some other features of the project.
Do you mind if I use your easel?
No, we're delighted.
That's what it's
Go
there
ahead.
for.
Thank you.
Would you just kind of point the easel so that the public can get a look at it as well?
This okay?
Perfect, if it's fine with you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Just take a microphone with you, Mr. Gibbons, so you can
Sure.
be sure that you're picked up. And before you get into your testimony, your name is Adam Gibbons.
It is.
You're a registered architect
I'm a registered architect,
in
yes.
Massachusetts.
In the state of Massachusetts.
Where's your office?
I'm in Georgetown, Massachusetts.
Oh, sure, of course. Thank you.
So do I need to hold this button down while I speak?
I don't think so. As long as the green is on, I think you're
It
in
is.
business.
Okay.
Fire away.
All right.
Can everyone see these plans?
It's very hard to see.
Why don't we do this?
Would it be better if I just held it up? I don't mind that. No, that's okay. That's all right. It's on the fly. So this is a blown-up copy of the site plan that was included in the application. It shows dotted in red one of the existing structures. The second one is not dotted in red, but it's outlined here. So there's a single family. I think actually this is a two-family. That's a single family, and those are the two structures we'd like to remove. They're currently in a state that does not represent, I guess, what you would think is acceptable, which is why we end up with a lot of revolving tenants rather than permanent tenants, which is ultimately the goal of anyone trying to rent their property.
But they are inhabited at the present time?
They are, yes.
Are they fully tenanted?
I believe so.
Okay.
And that's 9 beds total. So the new structure, which on the first level is highlighted in blue, and then dotted is the space above. It's cantilevered, so it allows easier access to the rear of the site, which is where we have the parking. Currently, as stated before, there's 2 tandem parking spaces, so it's really only one tenant's able to use that parking. In this case, we're allowing each unit to have a deeded space. We'd like to have more, but the size of the site kind of prohibits that. Does anyone have any questions about the site plan? Nope. Anyone?
Why don't you continue with
I'll
your
continue.
presentation?
Okay, thank you. So, the bottom set of elevations represent the existing elevation on Granite Ave. So that'd be the view from Granite Ave.
Can you hold that up again?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Of course. This here is the structure that sits on Granite Ave. The other residential property is in the back of the property. It's not really seen from the Granite Ave elevation, which is why it's not shown. That represents they're both 3-story buildings, 3 units in total, 9 bedrooms in total, the 2 parking spaces. The second elevation is an overlay of the proposed structure adjacent to the 2 neighboring properties. Now, on the south side of the building is a parking lot, and I believe it's for the Dunkin' Donuts that exists around the corner on Adams Street. And that's why there's nothing shown on that side. So the new structure is 4 stories, 6 units, 11 bedrooms total. So that's 5 2-bedroom units and 1 1-bedroom unit. 6 parking spaces total, and that represents parking for each unit, deeded for each unit. And then the commercial space, which will exist on the ground level, is about 827 square feet. That can change. It's going to be quite adaptable to pretty much any kind of office or professional service, potentially retail, but I think we're leaning more towards a professional service. I'd like to point out that although we are at 4 stories, we're only about 6 feet taller than the adjacent residential property. The total height is 43 feet, even though the max is 45. There is a structure down the street south that is the full 45. I believe that's the funeral home that exists down that way, as far as the height of the
That's a
structure.
Dolan funeral home?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, the total height of that building is 45 feet. So we're actually 2 feet under that. Although we are at 4 stories, which is what we're requesting, we tried to keep the height of the building as low as possible so we are not looming over the adjacent properties and any neighbors nearby. Any questions? Yes?
You're not showing any space between the new construction and the building.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I stop? Let me just talk about procedure here.
Sure.
Okay. The questions are asked to the board and not to you.
Okay.
You don't invite questions from the audience.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll invite them. Because otherwise what's going to happen, you're going to get into this colloquy back and forth, and we're going to have the hearing out of control.
Understood.
So have you finished your presentation?
I just have a couple more boards I'd like to hold up, and then I'll stop. I'll make this very,
And
very
also, I'd
quick.
like to have the board members ask their questions before
Absolutely.
the audience, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Very
great.
sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Okay, so again, just for clarification, I colorized the other elevations, which are also part of the application. The proposed rear elevation, the left side and the right side elevation. This particular elevation, there's a dotted line here representing the building next door, and it's really just for reference. And then the final board is a kind of a before and after. So this is a shot just south of the property showing the two buildings, the two existing buildings on the site. And then the lower image represents a rendering of the proposed structure going in its place. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, and I'll put these back up here, and I will stop talking.
No, why don't you stay right where you are? Because
sure.
you may need to refer to any of
Yep,
the...
absolutely.
So, Ms. O'Donnell, do you have any questions of Mr. Gibbons?
I don't really know where to start.
Let's start at the beginning and take your time.
Well, I noticed on the plan, you're calling for 6 spaces, 1 for each of the, I didn't realize they were going to be condos, not rental. And then where's the commercial parking?
There's currently no space for commercial parking on the site.
Where do you suppose people using the commercial space, if it's office or retail, are going to be parking?
I would anticipate the street parking here or the parking lot adjacent.
The parking lot adjacent belongs to the bank. The parking lot behind you belongs to the Dunkin' Donuts. Are you proposing, or is your client proposing to work out some rental arrangement with the Citizens Bank for parking spaces?
It's a little early for to make that statement, but that is part of the plan. Yes.
Because I mean, you would know, as many of us do, that the parking in East Milton is at an absolutely critical juncture at this point anyway. So it's not as though there are a lot of parking spaces around here that could be used by the commercial people. Certainly, if you had retail, which would require some sort of the parking for the people who work in the shop and parking for the people visiting the shop. And I don't see that that's a possibility anywhere around here.
That's a
But
fair observation.
So that's the idea, is that those 6 parking spaces are only for the people that are rent or owning the condo units.
Again,
Okay.
that is the intent. If they end up being deeded or otherwise, that's minutia that I think will end up working out. I think right now we're showing the 6 spaces, and it makes sense to associate them with the condos. To say they're exclusive to those condos, it's not yet determined.
Well, this is probably more of a question for Attorney Wolf, but I thought that the parking in a business district, that commercial uses in a business district, have to have 1 parking space for every 250 square feet.
I did see that in the bylaw.
So are you requesting a variance for that as well?
If we can make If we can make an on-the-fly motion for, to request a variance for that, for the commercial space, we would amend our application verbally.
Interesting.
If it needs to be renoticed, obviously, we would understand.
Because I believe that somewhere along the application that it said that there were going to be 3 spaces for the commercial use. But maybe that was in Mr. Prondak's letter, not in your application?
It certainly was in Mr. Prondak's letter. I'm
Yeah.
not sure it's in the
Okay.
application.
That's my question at the moment. I'm sure I'll have more,
Okay.
but that's the
Mr.
initial
Gray.
one.
I don't have, well, I'll ask one question I think I know probably the answer to, but my sense is that in looking at the picture, right, the size of the building feels kind of massive to me. It's big for that space. Now, maybe it's just because I'm used to having driven 20 million times past the slightly dilapidated buildings that are there. So I'm trying to, keep an open mind, wrap my head around it, all of that stuff. But it seems kind of big. So my question was, does it have to be as tall as it is in order for the project to be viable?
In regards to the overall height, or actually losing a story?
Yeah, I'm talking about losing a story, or making the mass of the building smaller.
If we end up losing a story on the building, then we end up with less beds.
Yeah, that's right.
Complete, and
Yep.
it does, the
Less
numbers.
beds, more parking.
I'm sorry?
Less beds, more space available for parking. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, fewer,
if-
fewer people competing for the 6 parking spaces, whether they be deeded or not. right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be accurate.
I'm not sure whether economically it would work, which is sort of the question I'm asking, but
Yeah, that is kind of a deal breaker for the project. Just the way the numbers work, if you lose that top floor and those 4 beds and those 2 condos on the top, then it does change the economics of the project a bit.
yeah.
Trust me, if we didn't have to come for a special permit, we wouldn't.
Right. I think that's it for the moment.
Well, I thought Mr. Gray's question had a twist in it, and he was talking about whether the loss of a story would make the project economically not viable.
Right.
Was that the substance of your testimony?
Yes. But it would not. Yeah, it would change the viability of the project for the owner.
Okay. As part of your duties, and I'm not suggesting this is part of your duties, but do you know whether any traffic or parking studies were conducted by you or the applicant regarding
No.
this type of development?
No, we did
Do
not.
you have any information about what the parking conditions are in East Milton Square at various times of the day? Or?
Not beyond the surrounding spaces adjacent to the site.
Okay, so there was no traffic engineer
No.
retained to give you
No,
guidance?
not at this stage, no.
Why do you say that? You say at this stage as if this whole project is very preliminary and you're coming to us with a definitive plan that you want approved. Why do you say at this stage? Is this a work in progress and we
Oh,
never,
no,
we never know? This is your proposal.
I think what I mean is that as far as understanding what would be required of us, we didn't know till we stepped in the room.
Mr.
Like,
Chairman?
would we require?
If I may.
Sure.
The parking, right now, I don't think we would need to justify, we wouldn't be able to put any retail on the first floor unless we can provide to the building inspector satisfaction that we have 3 spaces, I think would be 3 spaces for that use.
4.
Well, I'm just
One
relying.
for every 250 square feet.
Okay, I'm just relying on the building inspector's denial letter. He said 3, but 4 it is. If it's 4, it's 4. Whatever the number is,
Whatever.
I think we'd have to, before we could successfully rent that space, we would need to provide to the building inspector's satisfaction that we can, as we sit here tonight, without requesting a
Why
variance.
isn't it to our
it's-
satisfaction rather than the building
I think if it's
commissioner?
site plan approval
But the
versus,
building commissioner isn't giving you site plan approval.
I'm sorry, planning board.
Yeah, but
As-
you haven't even gone to the
I
planning
understand.
board. Have you?
Right, no.
I mean,
Well, let me back up.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wolf, sorry. Did you understand that you have the opportunity to have a preliminary session with the planning board and go over this project informally and get their viewpoint?
Yes.
Okay, did you do so?
No.
Why didn't you?
Because I was retained about a month ago to come to a special permit hearing, and I did not inquire of my client that whether he had done the preliminary steps.
So you weren't hired as a development lawyer?
No.
You were hired for your expertise in zoning?
Just in permitting, correct?
And that's just what your role is there?
Correct.
Okay, so you weren't involved in whether there was a discussion or a conversation as to whether to go to the planning board?
That is correct.
And can you tell me whether this project has been vetted, to the best of your knowledge, has it been vetted with the selectmen of the town of Milton?
It is not.
Has it been vetted with Bill Clark, who's the planning director of the town of Milton?
That I do not know.
Okay, so to the best of your knowledge, this project hasn't been vetted with anybody, but you're here seeking these zoning relief from the Board of Appeals in the first instance.
To
To the best of your knowledge.
That is correct. And I think without putting words in my client's mouth, some of the rationale, his rationale was, the building's a little big, he understands. He understands that as it stands today, It is one of the larger buildings in the area, not the largest, but it would be one of the larger buildings. He felt that adding retail or adding office space in a business zone district and adding 3 bedrooms, but adding an additional 4 spaces was not something that would require a full-blown traffic study, and would not necessarily require would not require a parking variance. That was a mistake. I think we should have been before you asking for because it is on street and not really nestled in the village, because it's on street more on the outside, we should have come to you seeking a variance from strict compliance with the parking provisions. I agree with you completely.
Okay.
He didn't, in the denial, he didn't require it, so we came here with those 2 items only.
Let me ask Mr. Gibbons another question that occurred to me while Mr. Wolf was discussing these issues. I'm not an architect, so this may not be a precise question.
It's okay.
But in constructing a building of this size, did you consider the sight lines as you're driving down Granite Avenue towards East Milton Square, and whether a building of this massive size would tend to block out all of the properties behind the building and block out East Milton Square to traffic?
That
In other words, so the views and vistas as you're driving.
Yeah.
Is that a consideration that architects
absolutely.
usually and customarily take into effect?
That's
Is it-
kind of the point of this actual image, because it does show it at an oblique, but you don't actually block any of the buildings. You block some of the trees here, but you don't block the buildings. You can still see all the adjacent structures as you're going down Granite Ave.
Well, not if I'm on Granite Avenue.
Yeah, you're on the other
But
side of the
I'm on the other
expressway
side.
taking
The,
this
Trying to be on
photograph.
the
the
building
expressway
doesn't
in that
actually
picture, I
stand,
think.
it stands back. It doesn't stand proud of any of the other buildings.
It's right on the lot line, isn't it? In front of that building?
This projection does, but the rest of it's set back.
Set back what, half a foot? Or?
No, I think it's 6 feet from the edge. So there's the property line there, and there's the edge of the building there. And then even the overhang is set back by a couple, I think it's about a foot, maybe 1.5 feet from the property line.
What was it your intent when did you design this building? I should have asked you that. Okay.
Yes, I did, sir.
Okay, well, good, now we have someone to talk to.
Yes.
When you designed that building, was it your intent to try to maximize the size of the building and maximize the profits from the project as a result of the costs of construction in this area and the like? I mean, are you stretching the envelope here to max out the development potential of this particular lot? Or these two
That's a good question. It's actually
Yeah.
done a little bit. It's not so much from the economical point. It's more from acceptable size. So I was asked to design by the owner to design 3 stories of residential and 1 story of commercial, and also to allow access to the rear of the property for parking. So that's why we had the cantilever, and that's why there's like a drive, so we still had access. It reduced the size of the commercial space a bit, and then above that, I was able to put 2 units per floor. And that's just based on kind of acceptable sizes for a bedroom, a kitchen, and kind of an open plan for a living space. They're not gratuitous by any stretch.
What's the gross building area of this particular structure?
The total?
Total, approximately.
It's 5,715 square feet.
And what's the maximum building area? What's the maximum gross building area that you could put on this site?
Oh, that is also a good question. Let's see, it should be on the site plan. And it's not on there.
Oh, it just says that the proposed is there on the site plan over here, right here. And then maybe it's on the,
5,000? Oh, that's what's the.
It's 40% max or 5,000 square feet. 15. Oh, that number also includes the the retail. That's not right. Building coverage total 25, gross floor. 40% of the total. Just a second. So I'm kind of looking at this on the side. So 40%, so 10, 3. You know,
Can you do this rather than?
I'll have to get
I
back
don't-
to you on that.
Yeah, I don't mean
don't know.
to
No,
put
that's
you
okay.
on the spot because.
Yeah, that's
it's
fine.
difficult to do that in your head. But is it fair to say that the 5715 square feet of proposed gross building area is pretty close to the maximum build-out that would be allowable on site? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say.
Without doing the mathematics of it?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty close. I mean, we designed it so we weren't over, so, you know, we're under within the limits of, you know, acceptable living space and the commercial, we would have liked larger commercial space, but I think we kind of maxed out at a certain point in the footprint.
And that's
to allow
because you're putting
access.
so many condominiums in the building?
Oh, no, that's the lower half. It was mainly to create access to the back of the property. We needed to have enough driveway to get to the rear for parking.
Okay.
That's what kind of limited the commercial.
Okay. So I don't think the board members have any questions of you. But folks, we're going to see, I'm sorry.
Actually, I do.
Ms. O'Donnell, please.
How are people going to get out of those parking spaces? You don't, I mean, we have the 6 spaces, and it doesn't look like there's sufficient sort of turnaround. Are they going to have to like back out of the driveway onto Granite Avenue?
They're going to have to utilize this space and the driveway to turn around.
Is that sufficient,
Yeah.
you think?
No, I have turning radius diagrams I use to
Okay.
place the spots. I mean, they're not tight spots. I mean, each one is 18
Yeah, I noticed
by.
the size is pretty
yeah.
good. But that's, so you've factored in sort of a way to turn around and come out? Okay.
Yes. I mean, it's not going to be a walk in the park. There isn't. It's definitely not a large parking space. That's for sure. No
Okay.
question about that. It's going to be tight, but
So, sorry, where do you, sorry, you finished? Go ahead and
No,
finish, I'm
I
sorry.
had one other question about the commercial the viability of this site requiring the 4 stories, because you need to sort of have, you know, the condo units and the commercial. And while I am absolutely supportive of mixed use, there is a lot of commercial office space in East Milton Square that's vacant. So in your calculations of how this project works, what happens when you don't absolutely rent out that office space? I mean, does that crater the numbers for this project? Is that commercial space necessary for the financial development of this project?
that's also a very good question. The addition of the commercial space we thought was more of a kind of, it wasn't essential to the project. Like, we actually were just going to build a residential space, but we thought it would be more viable of a project to have a commercial element as part of the project. It wasn't actually originally part of our plan, but we thought it would be an asset to the project, not really a hindrance. Originally.
I would suggest taking a look at the vacant signs all over East Milton Square for office space before you think that that's going to be a great plan.
Mr. Gray?
It's valid.
Sorry, I was trying to figure it out from the plan. I haven't yet. Where's the curb cut? How do you drive in? I'm driving on Granite Avenue. I've just gotten off the northbound expressway. How do I get into that? And I live there. How do I get in?
The curb cut will be here. This is the
Granite
access
all right,
to
so
the
Granite
rear.
Avenue's down there. So all the parking is in the back of the, okay, I get it now. I was disoriented. It's all in the back of the lot. So the only way in and out of that lot is from the curb cut on Granite Avenue, correct?
Correct.
There's no other way out in the back. to go out the other side,
Not without
right?
an
'Cause-
easement from
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
from the
No,
neighbors.
that's fine. I'm just,
Yeah, currently, this is all parking here. This is the
Yeah.
Dunkin' Donuts parking, that's the bank parking
Okay.
there. And then there's a fence that will be torn down and rebuilt,
Yeah.
look a lot. I think it's wooden now, but it'll
Yeah.
be
So-
something nicer.
I hate to ask this question,
That's okay.
but we get 2 feet of snow, 3 feet of snow, and I'm the plow guy plowing out that driveway. Where's my snow going? Into the back of the spaces? I mean, I don't know. You're not a plow guy. I shouldn't be asking that question.
No,
You
it's,
bet it's not.
it's definitely something I've thought of.
We do get
But he
snow
lives in Georgetown.
occasionally.
They've got snow all over the place.
Well, I lived in South Boston
Yeah,
for
so you
10
know-
years.
so you know exactly
I know
what
the
I'm
problem.
talking
Yes,
about.
I'm very
Yeah.
familiar.
So I don't know. Okay, so they're coming in and out of Granite Avenue, and you think they've got room to turn around, and the only way they can get in and out is to, if they want to go south, they have to go out and around. Okay, I get it now.
Mr. Gibbons, let me just ask you one more question.
Certainly.
And I think I know the answer to it, but I don't think it's expressed in the record. And that is these condominium units that you're proposing here, or the applicant is proposing, these are all market rate units, is that right?
That's
None-
correct.
None of them are affordable units?
No, no.
Okay, great. Now, what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, it's 20 after 8, and this is not a trial. So if we open this up to 500 questions of Mr. Gibbons, we're going to be back for 1 or 2 or 3 more sessions. So that if anybody has a question that hasn't been asked and answered, you can certainly pose that to the board, and we'll have Mr. Gibbons answer the question. But we'd like to try to keep the questioning of witnesses reasonably discreet and succinct. How's that? So is there anybody who has a question, Mr. Gibbons? Yes, sir, right in the front. Yeah, you'll have to come up here and pose your questions to the board, and if it's an appropriate question, we'll have Mr. Gibbons answer it.
My name is Tony Flanagan. I'm at 36 Wood Street in Milton. So I don't want to reiterate anything you've brought up already. I appreciate the concerns you have with parking. I'm wondering, in addition to your parking concerns, so there's a home there now, and there are 9 beds, which I would imagine in a home doesn't necessarily mean 9 cars, 9 drivers. Whereas what's going in will have 11 beds, which I imagine would mean 11 drivers. So even though you're adding 4 spaces from the 2 that are there now, you're going from 2 to 6. Should they really need to add a lot more because you're in essence adding more drivers?
So is your question whether the parking is adequate or not under the
Certainly.
circumstances?
Right.
Did you want to briefly address that? I think you have, Mr. Gibbons, but why don't you just...
Sure. It's a single family and a double family, so there's 3 units total. I can't speak to how many drivers there are in those homes, but let's just assume 1 car per unit, just for a sake of discussion. And then we're proposing from 3 units to 6 units. And then the number of beds, that's just, we're trying to do an apples to apples comparison. But then would you also make the assumption that those 2 bedrooms, does that necessarily mean 2 cars, or does that mean 1 car per unit? Like if I buy the unit, I just have 1 vehicle. If I get a roommate, then perhaps there'd be 2 vehicles. But if I have my wife and my sons, we would probably still have 1 vehicle. When I lived in Southie, we had 1 vehicle. But now that I live in Georgetown, I have 2 vehicles because I have the space. But I guess that's kind of our approach in thinking as far as parking. I mean, we've utilized the space that we have, and we've reduced as much of it as we can. I mean, I would love to sneak as many parking spaces into this site as possible, especially understanding quite well that it's a difficult and touchy subject for all. I've been on Adams Street at noon, and I drive a Chevy Avalanche. There's no place to park that thing anywhere near there. However, down Granite Ave a ways, there were parking spaces. So I think that was kind of our thought, is that Granite Ave, although heavily traveled during rush hour, during the day, it's fairly open. There's really not, it's not as full as, say, peak hours, which noontime, I'd say, which is when I spent a lot of time there. It did get much busier, and the spots, do fill up. But to answer your question, I think in our line of thinking, it wasn't necessarily 11 drivers. I think we were thinking more along the lines of 6. That was our thought. A 2-bedroom unit. Say you were the buyer, and you moved in, would you have one vehicle or two?
Well, if I had a
Potentially.
roommate, then, I mean, any adult would have a car.
Sure, sure. But, so you'd have a roommate, though, not a family?
This is all hypothetical. I have
Yeah,
a family.
it is.
I wouldn't
It is
move into
true.
this place.
It's
yeah.
hard to analyze that.
Thank you,
I mean,
Mr. Flanagan, that's great. Mr. Wolf, you wanted to be heard.
Yes, I'd like to, hopefully we can, I'd like to try to stay away from some of the hypotheticals. On the ground today, the single family is not occupied by a single family, and the two families are not occupied by two families. It tends to be roommate situations where the number of cars, in theory, I suppose there could be 9 cars right now at the site. I don't know. I don't know. Would a 2-bedroom yield, a married couple with a child, with 1 car, 2 cars? It's hard to suggest, it's hard to know, but we think, improving the parking situation with 4 additional on-site spaces and adding 2 potential bedrooms to the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Mr. Flanagan. Yes, ma'am. Why don't you identify yourself, please?
Oh, come on. You don't know who I am? Hi, I'm Suzanne Brown. I live at the corner of Church and Adams, 566 Adams Street. Okay, I do have a 2-family, and I do have an income property. And it's a husband and wife, and they have 2 cars. Okay? I would like to know from the board, he keeps on saying on-street parking. The on-street parking closest to it is in front of Citizens Bank. There's no on-street parking in front of that property. There is no property around there that can hold the cars, because right now, Citizens Bank has an agreement with Mr. Chan's and Abbey Park. So there's no more places in East Milton. So in order for them to have a viable project, they have to have these beds. But yet, if there's an abundance of cars, there's no overnight parking in Milton. Where are these people parking? I don't think the project has adequate parking for what it is. But as, I forget your name.
My name's
Mr.
Adam.
Gibbons.
Adam, oh, sorry. As he said, the owner bought these properties, and they were run down. He knew what he was buying when he bought it.
Well, I know that, but see, now you're getting far beyond.
No, no.
You're supposed to ask questions
But
to be
wait.
posed to Mr. Gibbons and not to...
But why can't he just fix those, maintain the same?
That's not the subject we're talking about here now. If you have a question about Mr. Gibbons' presentation, you can certainly ask that question, we'll get an answer.
Okay.
Okay?
Well,
Because this is not public comment. I just opened it up, hopefully for a few minutes, to see if anybody has a question of Mr. Gibbons.
Okay.
Because they may have another witness. I don't know what their presentation is.
Okay.
But we're going to have a full opportunity to hear from anybody here who wants to express their views on the project.
Oh, okay, then I'm coming back.
Okay, good. Well, you'll be welcome back. Hope we didn't chase you away, Mrs. Briley.
Oh, no, I'm
Thank you. Is there anybody who has a specific question of Mr. Gibbons? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Farley, 24 Belcher Circle. You'll be happy to know these are going to be quick questions
Great.
with factual answers. I was wondering, one, what the average square footage size is for the 2-bed units? Suppose.
Sure. You know what?
It's on the plan.
Yeah, it's in the plan.
I didn't do my homework.
It's okay. So there's 2 types. The one on the left is 977 square feet, and then the typical unit on the right is 928 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
And they're all similar, exactly the same. all
Pretty
the way.
close, yeah. Just one more quick question. Do you have a total construction budget and a total sellout budget number?
You don't have it there? That's okay. We have done an analysis. I don't have those numbers. We'd have to get back to you on that
If
one.
you don't, you don't. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Not on hand. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Gibbons? Okay, so there are no other questions of Mr. Gibbons, and board members have no other questions. Mr. Gibbons, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Would you like me to leave these boards up for?
Why don't you leave them? Yes,
Okay.
that'd be helpful. You can take them with you
Oh, yeah.
when we're leaving. Mr. Wolf, do you have anybody else you'd like to proffer?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other evidence you'd like to propose?
We have no other evidence at this time.
Okay, great. What I neglected to do, and I apologize to everybody, is at the beginning of this presentation, we did receive this afternoon from Mary Costello an email today, and I'm going to summarize, and I've provided a copy to Mr. Wolf, okay? So I'm going to summarize this rather than read it verbatim. But Ms. Costello says that she resides on Mechanic Street in Milton. She understands that the variance and special permit is being sought, and she asks that it not be granted for the following reasons. 6 parking spaces are not enough to facilitate the units with commercial space. It's unrealistic to say 2-bedroom units will have only 1 vehicle. Mechanic Street, the employees park all over the place all day and night. Plain and simple, the height is completely out of character with East Milton Square, and they don't want a large building, 4-story building looming in their backyards. And this is a precedent-setting issue. They're concerned if a variance is granted, it's only a matter of time before everyone wants to start to develop oversized buildings in East Milton Square. And it's signed by 10 residents of Mechanic Street who are proximate to this particular project. Okay, so we'll have that as part of the evidence. So let me begin by asking, is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak in support of this application for variance and special permit? Okay, the record indicates there's no such person present. Is there anybody present who either has, and I'll open this up just a little bit, who either has questions of Mr. Wolf or his witness, or who otherwise wishes to speak in opposition to this application for variance? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Dr. Tracy Maloney. I am the owner of 408 Granite Avenue, immediately adjacent to the proposed building site.
Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Thank you. I just wish to reinforce my experience on a daily basis of what some of your concerns are. Parking is a problem. It's a commercial building. I am an orthodontist. I've been there 20 years, initially as a tenant, last 10 years as an owner. My father rented there. There was a dentist prior to that owned the building decades before. It's been a medical dental building for years. 6 years ago, the 2 tenants on the first floor retired at the same time, so I have had empty tenant space for a long time. The smaller unit is now taken, the larger one is still open. And parking is a concern. And when my units first became open, I had a very nice young man looking to start a business, and he came to the town, was told he had to do a parking study, and there was going to be cost involved, and he thought even with that, it wasn't going to get approved, and I offered to help with the parking study, and he just kind of got the message it wasn't going to work. So that has been, I have first floor tenant space that's been open for over 5 years, 6 years, right immediately next door. The parking is a continual problem, and when I first was at that building, there were 3 spaces right in front of the building, and that got taken away when they redesigned the traffic flow. So we lost parking that we had access. There was a chiropractor on the first floor, we were on the second floor, and we lost parking at that time. The other issue that you touched upon was snow removal. And the proposed picture shows a flat roof to this building, and I have a flat roof building. And I do periodically hire my person who clears the sidewalk on a regular basis to remove the snow on the roof. And that is the only conflict I've had with Mr. Arrowsmith. And it blocked the window of one of his tenants, and he asked me to remove it. And I went after my snow removal guy, who didn't do it as timely as he should have. And then Mr. Arrowsmith threatened me with a very expensive bill if I didn't get that removed. And, I've got a flat roof building. This is a flat roof building. Where's the snow going? And on the design, it's showing the two buildings immediately adjacent. What does that do for drainage? Where does that snow go? Where does the water go? We've had more extremes in weather and climate, and, this is very tight space. We are right on top of one another, and that creates problems. And also safety concerns in terms of if this does go through, it's a major project, what's going to happen during the construction time? I treat patients from age 7 and on, and they have younger siblings. How are they going to have access to the building while this is not a minor project? This is a major project. So, I don't think the amount of spaces that they have talked about really solve what the parking needs are going to be. When I was first there, Granite Ave was more open. U.S. Trust closed that bank, and the banking all went to Citizens. So Citizens is always very busy. Granite Ave is always very, very busy. So I think those are all valid concerns. But most notably, in terms of the mixed use, that building, I'm right next door, and I've had empty rental space for years.
Great. Anybody have any questions of Dr. Milton? Thank you very much for coming. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard on this application? I'm sorry. Yes, come on back. I have to bring Miss Brierly back, or Brown. Oh, she'll take me to task here.
Brown.
Miss Brown.
You need my name again?
Why don't you, just so the television folks will know who you are and where you live?
Suzanne Brown, 566 Adams Street.
Okay.
So again, coming into the thing, he did not know he needed a parking study, which right now would not be a valid time because they have Adams Street all torn up and people are avoiding it. But to go with the assumption that it's going to be, it probably would have to be deeded parking, and for one for each unit, I would like the board even to come up with an idea, where is the extra cars? If there is an extra car in the unit and/or guests going to park. Because we have a huge problem right now. Right outside my driveway is Church Street. Okay, to come out of Church Street, even to come out of it as it is right now, his property right now is dangerous because that's a turning lane. People come out of Dunkin' Donuts and it's difficult. But what Adam said was he has revolving tenants. So now he's making them condos. So once he makes them condos, each one has a deeded parking spot, then it's our problem as residents with the parking, with the overflow, with the guests, with anything else that's going on. And it's, as you said, oh, well, he may talk to Citizens Bank. It's not a viable option because Abbey Park and Mr. Chan's have already come to you and come to the selectmen and have already gotten approval on that. Dunkin' Donuts is open till 10 o'clock at night. So how are you going to police who can use the parking spots at 10 o'clock at night? Oh, well, you can use 1 through 3. I don't even see it working. And if you look at the picture, it looks like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You just drop the building right there, and we're all midgets. It's totally out of character. I grew up in the town. I understand you go further down and you have bigger buildings, but it just looks out of not really what it is. And the applicant lives in Milton. He should have known the zoning laws or what was expected of him before coming here. There really should have been a traffic study. And I think that's it. Yeah, parking. Parking's huge.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. We appreciate you coming. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard? Yes.
Everybody's coming back. Thank you again. Jim Farley, 24 Belcher Circle. Just another couple of quick questions. One, did the applicant talk to the abutters and East Milton Neighborhood Association or I understand from the testimony prior, there wasn't discussion with many places in town. But I just,
There's no evidence of that, Mr. Fowley.
okay,
There's no evidence that they did that.
okay, no, I didn't know that that was asked.
It wasn't, those particular groups were not asked, but I can ask Mr. Wolf, do you know whether any of those civic groups that Mr. Farley mentioned?
I wish
were
I could give you a
contacted?
firm yes or a no, but I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, just in terms of comment, and I'll be short, so it's not to waste folks' time.
No, you're
I
not wasting your
believe
time.
that-
We're happy you're here. That's why we're here.
This project is just premature and should not be considered, at least in this time, in this format, for a number of reasons. One, the applicant does not appear to be prepared. I have concerns, and I have more concerns after being here tonight. Well, it just seems like they're saying, well, on one hand, there's going to be deeded parking, one for each of the condo units, but on the other hand, well, we could figure out something for parking for the workers and the and possible customers for the other pieces, and it just doesn't, the numbers just don't add up, to my mind. Two, and I guess just to the board as well as to the petitioner, there's, I've gone to meetings on the Falcone proposal, which I think everybody is well aware of, proposing 71 units and mixed use also in the square. And I don't know that as spot zoning or granting this appeal, if we give this appellant their piece of cake, then that would affect the others' opportunity, right? So I don't know that it's even fair to the developer, one or the other, so I just think it needs to be a more holistic approach, and that this should be held in abeyance until some of this stuff shakes out and we can figure out what our East Milton Square is going to look like, holistically. All the other issues have been raised around the Falcone property, many of them present here, about parking, and the envelope of the whole square is only so big. So I just think that we need to look at what that square is going to look like, what we can accomplish. The buildings you're talking about, they're not the greatest, as has been stated. So, I'm not against doing something there, but I think we need to take a hard look.
Great, thank you for coming. Anybody else would like to be heard this evening? Yes, sir, please. Then we'll come over to this gentleman here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Arthur Doyle, Precinct 7, and a member of the board of the East Milton Neighborhood Association. Last week at a planning board meeting, Chairman Whiteside stressed on another project the advisability of dialogue with the neighbors. And I would respectfully request that if you are inclined to act favorably on this, that you hold off beforehand until such time as there is an opportunity for the proponents to meet with at least the board of the East Milton Neighborhood Association for a full understanding of what is proposed in their response to the proposal. Thank you very kindly.
Good, thank you, Mr. Doyle, thank you for coming. Anybody, this gentleman over here, sir, please.
Hi, good evening. I'm Chris Galbadis, 21 Mechanic Street,
How do you spell your name?
Galbadis.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the
Mechanic.
Board of Appeals.
I'm a property owner as well as a landlord. I own 2123. And some quick notes I took just along the way during the gentleman's presentation. As far as the state of the current buildings, I mean, I can speak for some of my neighbors here who own rental properties, improve them. That's the owner's choice, owner of the property, to, and somewhat in this setting, I feel being used as a, sob story is too strong of a word, but, oh, these poor buildings, they're so terrible, but I mean, it's a choice. As someone stated earlier, you know what you were buying, perhaps knowing full well that this was what you would like to do, which is, I suppose, your, as far as the height, Mr. Gibbons, you're comparing a flat-top cube building to a peaked roof. That's not apples to apples. And as an architect, you would probably know, I don't want to speak for you, but visual volume that takes up, it's night and day. So to compare a peaked roof of what exists there right now to what you're proposing definitely flies in the face of the character of the neighborhood, flies in the face of, I guess, consideration for the abutters, for the neighbors, for the overall look and feel of the square. The issue with the parking, in my estimation, is just indicative of, I hate to speak for anyone, but in my eyes, like a lack of preparation or a lack of accommodating for that. So that's, to me, the tip of the iceberg. So if, we're just using parking as an example of what may be a problem with this project, I suspect the lack of preparedness, which I think the board kind of show that they feel they may or may not have, I don't want to speak for you either, that might be indicative of other aspects of this project, which are out of my realm to comment on, but it's a foreboding sign. The design, as far as wanting to max out the economics of the project, I mean, that's full and well. I would too. I mean, if I was a developer or builder, of course. I'm wondering if this is a case of, let's ask really big so we can get down to where we truly know we're going to end up. And if that is the case, then I, think some people's detectors, I'll leave it at that, kind of fire off. So why don't we come with what you truly want? And I don't want to speak for you, but that's what I'm feeling. So that way, this isn't just wasted time. The dialogue is for something that's actually going to happen or can happen, rather than, let's ask for this, knowing that we're really only going to get this. That's disingenuous in my mind, and the lack of communication with the neighborhood in general, it's a bad foot forward. And I think the square can use improvement by all means. So I don't want to come across as negative Nancy here. Sorry, Nance, but, and again, I'm just going through some quick notes I made here. I'll be done in a moment. The issue with proposing retail space at the bottom, hypothetically, office, a professional space. I mean, someone spoke to it already, but, I mean, the first thing I thought of, well, there's a ton of vacant professional space. Maybe not Class A space, maybe not Class B space, but there is space, and all those are vacant, most likely for the large reason that there's nowhere to park. And if you have clients, and I don't know if the parking that is required of professional space or retail space is based just upon the square footage, but what about the numbers of clients or customers that retail space now brings, in addition to employees of that space? So that's, I don't think, being accounted for. Again, the retail vacancies, they're symptomatic of the overall parking situation in East Milton Square. And that's just the example of, many other things that are, the design, height set aside, which I'm not in favor of that height. Just visually, it's not the Back Bay, it's not a historic district, but it's still East Milton Square. That, I'm up for anything, but that kind of blew me away, that picture. And lastly, and I'm just hypothesizing here, is there for that retail space, having established that there's plenty of office and professional space available that's not being rented, and please don't let me speak for you, is your interest in the hospitality industry your backup plan to, well, we can always throw that in there? And I'm just kind of putting it out there, I'm not necessarily directly asking you, but
I'm sorry, sir, I'm sorry. Pardon me.
Is he allowed to respond?
I'm sorry, that was a
No,
rhetorical
I'm not
question, but
He can,
if
he can
feels
respond
like
after
asking,
Mr.
yeah.
Gelb. Sir,
Sure.
sir, this isn't a debate, okay? Let Mr. Galbitis finish, and if you want to be heard, we're delighted to hear from
No,
you.
that was it. I just asked a question more rhetorically, but it is a thought that I had, so I wanted to express that. If the applicant wants to discuss that, that's all fine and good, but it is something that I just want to put out there into the orbit that perhaps that is planned, which would, again, going back to just the example of one problem of parking, then that's going to be just compounded. I certainly wish the developer luck. I mean, I agree, what's there now isn't ideal. Somewhat by just circumstance of it is what it is, somewhat by choice, and perhaps that's a path that they chose to take or not, but thank you for your time.
Good, thank you, Mr. Galbitis. Sir, do you want to be heard?
No, it was just when he looked at me, I was just answering.
No,
So
it's
it
okay.
was no definitive.
Okay,
That was all.
that's fine.
To be polite.
That's fine. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard? Mr. Doyle, you've been heard, but if you want to come back here,
Again, Arthur Doyle, East Milton Neighborhood Association. The mention of an historic district was put on the table, and I just want to indicate that while that building may not be in the National Railway Historic District proper, it is in the area of that National Historic District. And we can provide maps for anybody who might be interested in having that information. Thank you.
good, thanks, Mr. Doyle. Lastly, anybody else who wants to be heard? Okay, there's no such other person. You've been heard once, sir, do you?
Can I?
Sure you can, but
Okay,
keep it short, okay?
You bet. Well, I don't know how this works, so I assume that the more people who speak about a certain issue means that it has more weight, or just the fact that you've brought up an issue.
It depends on what they say.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm simply reiterating what other people's concerns are, mainly about the look that this building really doesn't fit in with the square and what we all think of Milton, East Milton, things of that sort. So maybe I'm wasting your time.
No, you're not
but
wasting your time, but if we've heard it once, then we usually don't forget people's testimony. But you've got, go ahead, do one thing for me, so we'll have an orderly hearing. Just remind us who you are, so we'll have it on the record.
Certainly, Tony Flanagan.
Okay,
36
Tony,
Wood Street.
you spoke first, didn't you? I think you
I don't
did.
remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Flanagan. We're delighted to hear from you.
Okay. So I'm just reiterating the points that other people have made, but if that's really not of any value, then
I think we
don't need to.
understand what everyone has said, and we've taken notes, and we've got a pretty good recollection of that. But if you have something new to add, we're delighted to hear from you.
no.
Okay.
Just want to cast my vote.
Well, we admire your enthusiasm, Mr. Flanagan. Thank you very, very much, sir. So if no,
One more,
yes, ma'am.
something different.
Okay, we can't
Hopefully.
see you back there. You're tucked behind all of the men.
Lorindo Connor, 45 Wood Street. Granite Ave is one way. I'm wondering the flow of traffic through the neighborhoods getting into the parking lot. So do they have to go down Mechanic Street? They can't, I'm just curious and concerned about how people are going to be going through, and I don't live on Mechanic Street, but Pierce Street, all those little streets, they're going to get filled, they're going to get traffic, it's one way in.
So is your question?
Mike,
It-
I
no,
didn't
no.
know I had to have a question. I was just giving a concern.
You don't have to have a question, but is it what you're really asking? You're asking Mr. Gibbons to address how people reasonably enter and exit this parking lot area?
Yeah, are there two ways into it now?
How many access points are there, Mr. Gibbons?
The access point's actually the same. We're not changing the access point.
Okay, so there's one entrance and one egress. It's the same.
Correct.
Except there'll be more units.
There'll be more spaces.
There'll be.
Yes.
And I know parking's been addressed over and over. I'm in a one-family house, there's 3 of us, 3 cars. So once my daughter got her license, I mean, it happens. I go to work one place, my husband goes to work one place. So doubling the number of units, doubles the traffic, et cetera. So, okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. O'Connor. Finally, anybody else out there wants to be heard? And there's no such person. So we're going to end the comments section of this. And I want to ask Mr. Wolf, do you have any final comments you want to make? Not that you're required to do so.
No, just one comment. My client's submission of this project was for this project. If you said, shave it down to 3 stories, that's not on the table. If the special permit's denied, back to the drawing board, figure out what to do with the property. We're not looking for, if you said add another space, we can't, this is the project we're presenting. We're not using this as a negotiating strategy with anyone. It's just, this is the project.
Okay, that's well put, because as you understand, Mr. Wolf, because you're an expert in real estate and zoning, we're not the planning board. We're the Board of Appeals.
Right.
We're not being asked to review and modify this project or to attach substantial conditions to the project. We're here to vote on the project as presented, and that's what I think we intend to do tonight. It's otherwise, it could have been different, but I know this is no criticism of you. You weren't involved early enough in this project, because you were brought in a month ago, I think you said, for the zoning aspect of the project. Here, this project is asking for a use variance, and it's asking for a use variance in East Milton Square, which would cause chills up anyone's backbone if that was seriously contemplated. And normally, you'd vet this with the planning board, you'd vet it with the selectmen, you'd vet it with the town planner, and get various viewpoints. So that, but you're absolutely right. When we appreciate your position, that's our position as well. We're not here to force you to modify the project in any way. We're going to vote this application up or down based upon what's been presented.
Thank you.
Good, and thank you very much. So if you have nothing else to say, well,
So I'll cede the balance of my comments to Mr. Gibbons, and then we're done.
Oh, I just wanted to speak to the vetting with the planning department.
Sure.
I did actually speak with the planning department very early on when we were kind of putting this whole thing together. No one mentioned anything about a vetting process, but I did have discussions. I did send materials back and forth with the planning department. And again, this was in a very preliminary stage when we were kind of trying to shake out what we wanted to do on the site in the first place, because there was really no plan from the beginning. It was, I want to make an improvement on the site, what can we do? And the parking was brought up very early on, and we did make an effort to put as much parking on the site as the site would allow. It's starting to sound like the commercial space is really our wedge that's potentially eating up a lot of the, I'm not really even sure what the capacity of the site is if there was no building, if we just made it a parking lot, how many spaces we could get out of it. But we'll certainly explore that. As far as any of the other, a traffic study or a parking study, I was not made aware of that requirement by the planning. Again, these were very casual discussions over the phone, over email. It wasn't by any means a vetting process. Again, I wasn't made aware of that. Not to make an excuse at all, but I just wanted to say that we did indeed contact the planning department in the early stages of the project, and that we didn't just, make some materials and then run out here and try to get on the docket with you folks. But
no, I understand that, but I do think that it probably would have been more productive, and I think you wouldn't be in the position you're in now.
I agree.
And I think that's it's a little bit sad, we'll get into this.
Absolutely.
So if you have nothing further to say.
I do not, thank you.
Okay, we're going to end the evidence at this hearing, And it's the duty of the board to consider the application as presented, and whether a variance should be granted and whether a special permit should be granted. Mr. Gray, do you want to start out?
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming and for your presentation, for the drawings. I greatly appreciate it. As I look at the bylaw, at least with respect to the height, right? Section 5E1 requires, it basically says that in a business district, no building shall be erected or altered to exceed 3 stories or 45 feet in height, whichever is less. But then it says the Board of Appeals, upon a finding that additional stories and/or height are 1, this is my 1, reasonably necessary for the use of the building, and 2, will not be detrimental to the neighborhood in which the building is located, the board then may authorize by special permit a building not to exceed 5 stories or 65 feet in height, whichever is less. So, you're asking, first of all, you could as of right, well, I'm not going to make a ruling on that, but it looks like you could build something that was 3 stories or 45 feet high, whichever is less. You're looking for 4 stories, so it's you need us to find, if we're going to grant you the 4th story, or special permit for the 4th story, we have to make a finding that it's reasonably necessary for the use of the building, all right, maybe, and it will not be detrimental to the neighborhood in which the building is located. And frankly, I haven't heard any evidence tonight that would allow me to make that particular finding in writing, okay? I think the parking issue is significant. I think the massing, when I first opened this packet up earlier today, and I looked at the picture of the building on the front page of the drawings, my initial gut reaction was, oh my God, that thing it's a giant cube in the middle of East Milton Square. Now, I wanted to keep an open mind, and I understand why why the building is designed the way it is, and we're not really a board that's in the middle of design. That's not our job. But I have to make a finding, we all have to make a finding, that it's not detrimental to the neighborhood. So when I consider the size of the evidence I've heard on the parking issue, which, also from everyone here and also from my own, everyone's experience driving through that part of town, and I look at the size of that building and how extremely close it is to the neighboring building, to the not orthodontist. It was
Yes.
orthodontist?
Yes.
Okay. It's really close, and I don't think I can make a finding that it's not detrimental to the neighborhood based on the evidence I've heard tonight. So that's pretty much where I'm coming down. As far as the commercial aspect of it, I know it's a special use variance. That would be the use variance, right?
For the residential
For
aspect
the
of it.
residential aspects. Probably moot because I can't make the finding for the other piece of it, so. That's what I have to say so far.
Okay.
But I'm curious to hear what my fellow board members have to say.
Ms. O'Donnell.
Well, following up on your issue about the findings that we have to reach on the height and saying, is it detrimental to the neighborhood? And the second part of that, whether it's necessary for the operation of the building. My problem is that I don't think the case has been made that the commercial space is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know that there's empty commercial space all over the place in East Milton Square and in Milton in general. And we also know that there's no parking for the commercial space. So who's going to rent that? So that space is just going to be empty, so it's not going to be supporting the cost of running the building.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, if I was a condo owner paying for the empty space down on the first floor, I don't think I'd be very excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're thinking about the numbers of operating a condominium with the first floor being empty for years and years, that's not making the case that that's necessary for the operation of the building.
So it sounds like, though we're not a design board, and this probably would never fly, that if you traded the first floor commercial space for parking and built the stuff on top of it, it wouldn't look very nice, but whatever. But it would get to your point about fine. I don't even know why I said that. Just
But that's, the idea that people are using the commercial space are going to park someplace on the street is downright comical.
well, they can't park in front,
No,
I don't think,
no.
right? Because it's right.
Yeah, that's where the turning lane is for Adams Street.
You jump into the parking lot at the Dunkin' Donuts
Yeah.
and hope you're not
There
there
you
very
go,
long.
yeah.
Or something.
So that's my problem with it. I also agree with you that while East Milton Square isn't really known for its architectural outstanding characteristics, and as I said, I'm really in favor of mixed use, but the massing of that particular building
It's the
is,
massing. That's just what struck me the first time I saw it. It's hard not to, again, we're not a design board, but
right, yeah.
it was a huge
Yeah.
visual impact.
So, I mean, I said, and I said the parking, while I do know that, we make the argument that East Milton is great because you don't actually need a car, because you can get the bus and you can get, the walk to whatever you need to get to for the most part. So maybe 2 spaces per unit is excessive, but I'm not happy about 6 jammed into the back of that 3,000 square foot space. I just don't think it's adequate.
Okay.
Your turn.
My view of this is that this is an application that's gone amok. And I really think that if you had brought Mr. Wolf in, the applicant had brought Mr. Wolf in a lot earlier in the process, you wouldn't be where you are. I think the whole project would have been handled a lot differently. I agree with Ms. O'Donnell on the issue of the massing. I'm not an architect and I'm not a land use planner, I'm a lawyer. But I know a massive building when I see it, and that's a massive building, and that's a building that's maxed out to the nines. And when I think of it, I look at some of the condominiums that are being built in Quincy, and they're being built in Hancock Street, right in downtown Quincy. And they're being incorporated with commercial uses on the bottom and at least 1 or 2 floors of condominium. And they so blend in with the scape that it's tasteful. This building, and I'm not to be a master of taste, is just a massive white building plunked in space that blocks off East Milton Square. It's too big for the area, and the parking is just a terrible issue, and it hasn't been reasonably considered or reasonably presented by the applicant. So I don't think this application, as presented, has merit. And it's been well presented. Mr. Wolf has done a wonderful job bringing Mr. Gibbons in and making all of the arguments. But I have to go back to something that my colleagues haven't mentioned. And that's, you're requesting us to give you a use variance. You're requesting us to put condominiums in this building when it's not permitted in the business zone. And apparently the owner has given no consideration whatsoever to whether that issue should be vetted with the planning board, the board of selectmen, have neighborhood support. It's just going forward. We all know that the law is that nobody's entitled to a variance. You can prove all of the steps for a variance, and this board can still not give you the variance. We're not required to give you a variance. We've got discretion there. And while I've heard some very interesting and eloquent testimony from Mr. Gibbons about the project and all of that, there's been no discussion whatsoever as to what the legal tests for getting a variance are and whether they've been met here. And in point of fact, the Supreme Judicial Court, if you read their cases with respect to use variances are extraordinary. We gave that first couple here variances dealing with dimensional issues so that they could put a beautiful porch on their house and attach the house to their garage. And those are relatively insignificant variances. A use variance, putting in a set of condominiums in in a business zone. That's asking for the mother of all variances. That's not an incidental variance. That's a stupendous variance. And we've given use variances in this area. The Milton Marketplace is a perfect example. I think I sat on that case. There was a Ford dealership that had gone bankrupt that was there. It was a disaster. And along came the Milton Marketplace folks, and they have this wonderful facility that they put in. But that particular use variance was granted by this board with the unanimous support of the Board of Selectmen. I believe that the local senator spoke in support of it. The local representative spoke in support of it. It had been vetted by the planning board, and the planning board supported the variance, and this board went along with it. But I think for the applicant here to think that you can just make an application like this with its size and with its use, and to think without any input from the Board of Selectmen, without any input from the town planner, without any input from the members of the selectmen, the political forces in the town, that this demands a use variance, the community is going to be benefited by use variance. We have had none of that evidence. We'd be run out of town if we granted this variance, granted a use variance. Who are we? We're not the legislators. We're appointed officials. We're lawyers. We're appointed. We don't run for office. It's our duty to uphold the zoning bylaw. Yes, to vary it in certain respects, but if you want a significant variation, like a use variance, boy, you better come with some powerful evidence from the town fathers that they support this and it's in the best interest of the community. And here, I think in large part because Mr. Wolf wasn't involved early in this project, because that would have been sought. A lot of different things would have been done that weren't done here. So I guess the long and short of it is that the Supreme Judicial Court, in a whole series of cases, has criticized boards of appeal for granting use variances unless you have very exceptional circumstances and the evidence warrants it. And the reason for that is we're rewriting the zoning bylaw. If town meeting wants to change the zoning bylaw, they can do it. We shouldn't be, elected officials, practicing lawyers shouldn't be rewriting the zoning board, the zoning bylaw, unless the selectmen are telling us to do it, the planning board is saying this is in the best interest of the town. We don't want to wait a year to get articles before the town meeting. So I think it would be terribly unfair for this Board of Appeals to grant a use variance to this applicant on this particular application. And I hearken to the point that Mr. Wolf raised. He's not here looking for our comments on how to change the project, how to reform the project. We can tell him our views on the project, but we're here to vote on the application. This is the evidence. This is what we're voting on. So in my view, even though I think Mr. Wolf and Mr. Gibbons have done a wonderful job trying to support this particular project, and I really sincerely mean that, I haven't heard any evidence that warrants the granting of a variance under any circumstances whatsoever, and particularly a use variance. And secondly, I think I agree with my colleagues that this particular building, as far as massing and the parking issues, do not warrant me or this board granting a special permit to allow that type of use. So I intend, based upon what I've heard and on the evidence, to vote against this application for variance and vote against the special permit. No, do my board members want to be heard?
No, I second your comments.
Mr. O'Donnell? Okay, so all of those in favor of whether to grant the variance to allow the residential use in this business zone, please say aye. Okay, there are no votes in favor. All those opposed to granting the variance as proposed for residential purposes in the business zone, please say aye. Aye. So the vote is 3-0 against granting of the application for variance. And all those in favor of granting a special permit, I suppose the application is dead, but let's vote on it. Granting of a special permit for the parking and the residential use of the property, please say aye. And there are no votes in favor. All those opposed to granting the special permit on the facts of this case, please say aye.
Aye.
So that's 3 votes against the special permit, 3 votes in favor, against the application for variance. And so I think without any further ado, I want to thank you gentlemen for your time. You really did work hard and you made a great presentation with an impossible case in my view. And I think we will be adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Want to write it?